Matty, has it sunk in yet? Tonight's golden buzzer act. It hasn't sunk in yet. I am just ecstatic right now.
What really became of Matty Juniosa from Britain's Got Talent? He was 17 years old, standing in front of thousands of people. He opened his mouth and the entire arena went quiet. Not polite, quiet, not waiting quietly. The kind of quiet that only happens when something real is happening right in front of you. Simon Cowell did not speak. The audience did not breathe. Then it was over. And Britain had a new name to remember. That was the high point. What came after it is the part nobody talks about. Because somewhere between that stage and today, Matty Juniosa disappeared. Not quietly, not gradually. He was there, and then he simply was not. So what really happened to him? Stay with me. Because this story goes places you will not expect. The boy who stopped the room.
Never meant to cause you any sorrow. Never meant to cause you any pain.
Here is something most people do not know about Matty Juniosa. Before Britain knew his name, before the audition, before the judges, before any of it, he was just a teenager from West London trying to figure out where he fit in the world. That is where this story actually begins. Not every great talent comes wrapped in a perfect backstory. Some of them arrive quietly, without warning, without fanfare, without anyone in the room quite understanding what they are about to witness. Matty Juniosa was that kind of arrival. He was born and raised in West London. His family had Pacific Islander roots, Samoan heritage running deep through his bloodline. And anyone who has ever watched him perform will tell you that heritage was not just background detail. It was in everything he did. The warmth, the weight, the way he carried emotion as though it lived in his chest before it ever reached his voice. Growing up, Matty was not the loudest person in any room. People who knew him before the show described someone quiet, thoughtful, a little reserved. Not shy exactly, but careful. The kind of person who observes more than he speaks. Music, though, music was different. From an early age, singing was the one place where all of that careful, quiet energy had somewhere to go. His family encouraged it. His community could hear it. And somewhere in those years before the cameras, Matty Juniosa was building something inside himself that nobody outside his circle could yet see. Now, here's the first thing you need to understand. Britain's Got Talent is not a gentle program. It is not built for the faint-hearted. You walk out onto that stage, and within seconds, a panel of some of the most opinionated people on British television is deciding your future. The audience is enormous. The pressure is physical. You can feel it. Most grown adults fall apart under that kind of weight. Matty Juniosa was a teenager. The audition happened in 2023, and if you have seen the clip, you already know what happened. But even if you have watched it 10 times, it is worth slowing down and really thinking about what was unfolding in that room. He walked out looking exactly like what he was, young, nervous, and dressed simply. No theatrical entrance, no gimmick, no elaborate setup. Just a boy and a microphone and a song he believed in. When Simon Cowell asked him what he was going to sing, Matty said the title, and the judges exchanged the kind of glance that said they were prepared to be politely impressed at best. They were not prepared for what happened next. He started singing, and within the first few seconds, something in the atmosphere of that room changed. The audience, thousands of people who had been restless, noisy, and distracted, went still. Genuinely still. The way a crowd only goes still when they collectively realize they are watching something they will not forget. His voice was not just good. It was the kind of voice that makes people feel something they were not expecting to feel. Rich, controlled, emotionally honest in a way that cannot be taught or manufactured. You either have that quality, or you do not. Matty Juniosa had it in abundance. By the time he finished, the arena erupted. Not politely, not in that reserved British, we are impressed, but contained way. Fully, loudly, on their feet. Amanda Holden was emotional. Alicia Dixon was emotional. Even Simon Cowell, a man who has heard more auditions than perhaps anyone alive, sat forward in his chair with an expression that said this was not what he had been expecting at all. The golden buzzer conversation began almost immediately. And when it happened, When that button was pressed and the gold confetti came raining down onto that stage, and Matty stood there in the middle of all of it all. He looked like someone who could not quite believe this was real. That image went around the world. Within hours, the clip was everywhere. Social media pulled it apart, passed it along, and watched it again and again. Comments poured in from people in countries that had never heard of Britain's Got Talent before that day. The numbers climbed, millions of views, then more millions. Britain had found someone. But here is the question, and I want you to hold on to, because this is where the story gets complicated. When a 17-year-old walks into that level of attention overnight, when the whole world suddenly knows your face and your voice and your name, what actually happens to that person on the inside? Not on the stage, not in the interviews, not in the carefully managed public moments. What happens to the teenager beneath all of it? Because something happened to Matty Juniosa after that golden buzzer moment, something that the highlight reels did not capture, something that the fan comments, the viral clips, and the industry excitement did not prepare anyone for. We will get there. But first, you need to understand just how fast and how far that rocket was moving. The rise that felt like a rocket. Here is what overnight success actually looks like from the outside. It looks clean, it looks exciting, it looks like everything is falling perfectly into place for someone who deserves it. The interviews, the headlines, the numbers are going up and up and up. From the outside, it is a beautiful story. From the inside, it is something else entirely, and that is the part we need to talk about. The morning after Matty Juniosa's audition clip went viral, he woke up to a world that had fundamentally changed around him. His social media following, which had been the modest, ordinary following of a regular teenager, had exploded overnight. Tens of thousands became hundreds of thousands almost immediately. Comments were flooding in from every direction, people tagging him, sharing his clip, writing about him, talking about him in languages he did not speak, in countries he had never visited, to audiences who had never seen a Britain's Got Talent episode in their lives. That is not normal, not for anyone. And especially not for a 17-year-old from West London who had walked onto that stage without any professional management, without a publicity team, without anyone coaching him on what to do when the world suddenly turned its full attention in his direction. He was unprepared for its size. Almost everyone in that position is. Inside the competition itself, the momentum was just as powerful. As the live shows approached, the conversation around Matty grew louder. Talent competition audiences are knowledgeable and fierce in equal measure. They had watched enough seasons to know the difference between someone who was good and someone who was genuinely exceptional. And the consensus forming around Matty was unmistakable. He was not just a contestant. He was a frontrunner, and every performance he gave during the live rounds added another layer to that narrative. The voice held up under pressure. The emotion stayed consistent. The connection with the audience, that rare, unscripted thing that cannot be manufactured on a stage, was there every single time. Judges and commentators who had been cautiously enthusiastic after the audition were becoming less cautious with every passing week. Industry observers, the people who watch these programs not as fans but as talent scouts, were paying close attention. Here's the first micro loop I want to plant. Because while all of this was happening publicly, something else was happening privately. Something that none of the performance clips and highlight reels captured. Something that would only become visible much later when the noise finally died down enough for people to see clearly. We will come back to that. Outside the competition, the opportunities were beginning to stack up. This is how it works for talent show breakthroughs, especially those that cross over into genuine viral territory. The doors do not open one at a time. They open all at once, simultaneously, and often without any warning or structure around them. Requests for appearances were coming in. Media outlets wanted interviews. Music industry figures were making contact. His name was appearing in conversations far beyond the Britain's Got Talent ecosystem. For a teenager with no prior professional infrastructure around him, that volume of incoming attention is overwhelming in a way that is genuinely hard to describe. Even experienced artists with years in the industry and entire teams around them struggle when attention arrives at that scale and speed. Matty had none of that infrastructure. He had his talent, his family, and a story the whole world had decided to follow. The weight of that expectation was building, and here is the macro loop that runs through everything that comes next. Because there is a pattern. And it is not unique to Matty Juniosa. It is a pattern that has played out with young talent coming off major competition stages for as long as those stages have existed. The pattern goes like this. The moment happens. The clip goes viral. The attention arrives. The industry circles. The public falls in love. And then, quietly, almost invisibly, the pressure begins to accumulate in places that nobody is watching. Not on the stage, not in the interviews, in the private spaces, in the ordinary moments between the extraordinary ones, in the gap between who the world has decided you are and who you actually are when the cameras are not running. That gap is where things start to fracture. And for Matty Juniosa, that gap was about to become impossible to ignore. Now here's what I want you to hold in your mind. Everything described so far, the audition, the golden buzzer, the viral explosion, the competition, momentum, the industry interest, all of it happened within a matter of months. The timeline was compressed in a way that would test anyone. And compressed timelines do not give people space to process. They do not give people space to adjust. They do not give people space to figure out what they actually want from any of this. They just keep moving forward. And something about the speed of it all, something about the gap between the public story and the private reality, was about to come to the surface. But that story does not start where you might expect it to. It starts with a silence. When the noise stopped, pay attention to this part, because this is the section that most people skip over when they talk about Matty Juniosa. This is the part that gets glossed over in the highlight reels, the fan tribute videos, and the Where Are They Now articles that treat his story as a simple rise and fall narrative. It is not a simple story, and it does not deserve a simple telling. There is a specific kind of silence that follows a very loud moment in a person's life. It is not the comfortable silence of rest. It is not the peaceful silence of someone who has arrived at a safe place. It is the disorienting silence of someone who has been moving at incredible speed, and then suddenly, without warning, finds themselves standing completely still. That silence arrived for Matty Juniosa in the months following Britain's Got Talent. And when it arrived, it was deafening. Here is what the public timeline looked like from the outside. The competition ended, the season wrapped, the final results came in, and the world moved on to the next thing the way the world always does after a talent competition ends. The conversation shifted. The daily headlines moved to other names. The algorithm found new content to push. And Matty Juniosa, the boy who had stopped an entire arena cold with nothing but his voice, stepped back into something resembling ordinary life. Except ordinary life no longer existed for him. Not really. Because here's the thing about that level of public attention. It does not just arrive and then politely leave when the program ends. It changes the texture of everything around you. The way people see you, the way people treat you, the expectations that attach themselves to your name and follow you into rooms you thought were private. He was no longer just a teenager from West London. He was a symbol. He was a story. He was a thing that people had projected their feelings onto. And that projection does not come off easily. Now here is the first thing that started to become visible. In the months after the show, Matty's public presence began to change in ways that fans noticed but struggled to interpret correctly. Posts became less frequent. The energy that had characterized his earlier social media presence, the warmth, the openness, the willingness to engage directly with the people who had supported him, began to pull back. Interviews were sparse, public appearances were limited, and from the outside, it looked like a career stalling. However, from within, it was something more complicated than that. Matty himself has spoken about this period carefully and honestly in ways that deserve to be taken seriously rather than reduced to tabloid shorthand. He has talked about the disorientation of moving from complete anonymity to complete visibility within a few weeks. He has talked about the difficulty of processing an experience of that scale without the support structures that established artists have built around them over the years. He has talked with real honesty about his mental health. And this is where the micro loop from Section 2 pays off. Because the question was never really about the career. The question was always about the person inside the career. What does it do to a 17-year-old when the entire world forms an opinion about them overnight? When strangers on the internet feel entitled to weigh in on your talent, your appearance, your future, your worth? When the gap between the version of you that exists in public and the version of you that exists in private becomes so wide that navigating between the two starts to feel genuinely exhausting, it takes a toll. a real, measurable, documented toll. And Matty Juniosa was not immune to it. This is not a unique story in that sense. The entertainment industry is filled with young people who achieved extraordinary levels of visibility before anyone around them, including themselves, fully understood what that visibility cost. The names change. The details shift. But the core dynamic is depressingly consistent. Talent gets discovered, talent gets amplified, and then the human being attached to that talent is left to figure out the rest largely on their own. Here is the macro loop progressing. Because the industry interest that had been circling Matty during and after the competition did not translate cleanly into the kind of structured, supported career trajectory that his talent warranted. This is another pattern, and it is one that the talent competition world has a long and uncomfortable history with. The show creates the moment. The show captures the audience, but the show does not build a career. That responsibility falls to management, to labels, to the infrastructure that is supposed to form around a young artist after the cameras leave. And for Matty, that infrastructure was slow to solidify. Conversations happened. Meetings took place. There was genuine interest from people with the power to shape a career at that level, but interest and action are two different things. And in the gap between the two, time passes, momentum softens. The window that felt infinite during the competition now feels like it has edges. That gap between what the industry promised and what it actually delivered is one of the things Matty has been most candid about since. But here's what I need you to hold on to right now. Because we are not at the end of this story yet. Not even close. What happened next did not look like what you might expect from a young artist navigating a stalled career and a difficult mental health period. It did not look like giving up. It did not look like disappearing. It looked like something quieter and more deliberate than either of those things. And it started with the decision that Matty made entirely on his own terms. No management input, no industry pressure, no public announcement, just a choice. And that choice is the thing that changes everything about how you understand the rest of the story. What was it? We are almost there. The truth behind the disappearance. This is the part everyone got wrong. And when I say everyone, I mean the fan forums, the comment sections, the entertainment blogs, the casual observers who watched the silence stretch on and drew their own conclusions without waiting for the actual story. They called it a disappearance. They called it a flameout. Some of the cruelest corners of the internet called it proof that the golden buzzer moment had been a fluke. Every single one of them missed the point entirely. Matty Juniosa did not disappear. He stepped back, deliberately, consciously, on his own terms and in his own time. And there is a fundamental difference between those two things that matters enormously when you are trying to understand what actually happened. A disappearance is something that happens to you. A step back is something you choose. And Matty, for all the chaos and pressure and noise of the period that preceded it, made a choice. He chose himself. Not in the shallow, performative way that phrase gets thrown around online. In the real way, the difficult way, the way that requires a person to look honestly at what they are carrying and decide that no level of external validation is worth the cost of losing themselves completely. For a teenager who had just experienced one of the most intense public moments a young person can go through in the modern entertainment landscape, that is not a small thing. That is an enormous thing. Here is what was actually happening during the period the public misread as stagnation. Matty was working, quietly, consistently, and without the fanfare that had characterized his introduction to the world. He was writing, developing material that reflected who he actually was as an artist, rather than who the competition format had needed him to be. Because those are two different things, and the gap between them matters enormously to someone who takes their craft seriously. He was also, by his own account, doing the interior work that the exterior chaos had made impossible during the competition period. Reconnecting with the reasons he had loved music before it became a public spectacle. Rebuilding a relationship with performing that was grounded in genuine passion rather than survival under pressure. This is not the story of someone who crumbled. This is the story of someone who recognized that the foundation needed reinforcing before any further building could happen. Now here is where the micro loop from section 4 resolves. The question was what decision Matty had made on his own terms. The answer is both simpler and more significant than most people expected. He decided to take his time. In an industry that runs on urgency, on momentum, on the relentless pressure to capitalize immediately on every opportunity before it evaporates, Matty Juniosa looked at everything being offered to him and said he was not ready yet. Not never. Not goodbye. No, I'm done with this, just not yet. And the people around him who genuinely had his best interests in mind supported that decision. Because the alternative, rushing a young artist with extraordinary raw talent into a commercial pipeline before he had the tools and the clarity to navigate it, was a much more reliable route to the kind of genuine disappearance that the internet had already prematurely announced. There is something else worth saying here. Matty has been open in the interviews and public conversations he has chosen to have during this period about the role his faith and family have played in keeping him grounded. His Samoan heritage, the community values embedded in how he was raised, and the understanding that identity runs deeper than any competition result or viral moment. These things were not incidental to how he navigated this period. They were central to it. And that groundedness, that refusal to define himself entirely by the public narrative that had formed around him, is a significant part of why the story did not end the way the comment sections predicted it would. So let the macro loop begin to close. Because here's the truth that runs underneath every section of this story. Matty Juniosa was never lost. He was never gone. He was never the cautionary tale that some people were already preparing to write about him. He was a young man with genuine, remarkable talent, navigating an experience that very few people at his age are equipped to handle, doing it with more self-awareness and more integrity than the industry that briefly consumed him deserved. And the story that comes next is not a comeback story, because you cannot come back from somewhere you never truly left. It is something better than that. Where Matty stands today. Here is the part that actually matters, not the audition, not the golden buzzer, not the viral clip that traveled around the world in 24 hours and made a teenager from West London into a household name overnight. Not even the silence that followed all of that. This part, right here. Because everything before it was set up. Everything before it was context. The real story of Matty Juniosa is not the story of a moment. It is the story of what a person chooses to do after the moment passes. And that story is still being written. By the latter part of 2024, something had shifted around Matty. Not with a bang. Not with a carefully timed press release engineered to dominate entertainment headlines for a week. Not with the kind of orchestrated comeback moment that industry publicists package and deliver on a schedule designed to manipulate the algorithm. It happened the way real things usually happen when they are built properly from the beginning. Quietly, consistently, with the kind of momentum that does not spike and collapse but instead builds slowly from a genuine foundation. Matty began showing up again, not the version of him that the competition format had briefly needed him to be, not the packaged, pressure-tested, audition-ready presentation that television requires from its participants. The actual version, the one who had spent the better part of a year doing the private work that public success had made temporarily impossible. He began releasing music independently. Careful, considered, unhurried releases that prioritized something real over something commercial. No major label machinery behind them. No enormous promotional budget pushing them into spaces they had not earned organically. Just music that meant something, offered to an audience that had never stopped caring. The people who had been waiting noticed immediately, and they told other people, and those people told other people. That is how it started. The response was more telling than any chart position could have been. Because here's the truth about an audience that connects with genuine talent on a genuine level. They do not simply move on when the algorithm stops serving them your name. The casual observers leave. The fair weather supporters drift toward the next thing. That is the nature of attention in the digital era, and there is no point pretending otherwise. However, most did not expect the unreal comeback that happened in Matty's life. The meteoric rise. In the early months of 2026, Matty Juniosa's life underwent a transformation so total it felt like a tectonic shift. For 3 years, he had lived a quiet, hard-working life in Glasgow, Scotland, moving there in 2022 to pursue musical theatre studies at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. To make ends meet, he worked as a part-time waiter, often taking shifts at the iconic Horse-Show bar while dreaming of a stage far larger than a pub corner. The catalyst for his recent life change was his historic run on Britain's Got Talent Season 19. In March 2026, Matty stepped onto the stage in a borrowed suit carrying the weight of past rejections, specifically his 2019 elimination from Idol Philippines. His rendition of Prince's Purple Rain was so undeniable that Simon Cowell pressed the first golden buzzer of the season, a moment that instantly went viral with millions of views. By May 2026, Matty achieved what only 3 other acts in the show's history ever had. He received a second golden buzzer during the semifinals from Amanda Holden after a soaring cover of Aerosmith's Dream On. This cemented his place as a frontrunner for the grand final and turned him into a global symbol of Filipino resilience. While BGT provided the platform, Matty's most significant recent achievement is his leap into professional musical theater. On April 30, 2026, it was officially announced that Matty had been cast in the West End production of Jesus Christ Superstar at the legendary London Palladium. He is set to play the role of Annas, the calculating high priest, performing alongside stars like Sam Ryder from June 20 to September 5th, 2026. This role marks the fulfillment of a lifelong dream to make music and perform for a wide audience on a daily basis. Today, Matty lives in the tension between being a viral sensation and a student performer. He has had to warn fans about fake social media accounts impersonating him, a strange byproduct of his overnight fame. Despite the global attention, he continues to credit his Filipino roots and his time in Glasgow for the warmth and weight people hear in his voice. From a singing competition loser to a West End star and BGT finalist, Matty Juniosa's life in 2026 is no longer about finding where he fits in the world. It's about finally standing on the stages he was always meant to occupy. Would you like to see the full cast list for his West End debut, or more details on his final BGT performance strategy? Matty Juniosa's journey proves that the silence between the spotlight isn't a disappearance. It's where a legend prepares for its next act. From Glasgow's bars to the West End stage, his story is a masterclass in resilience and vocal power. As he transitions from a viral golden buzzer act to a professional performer, the world isn't just watching a singer, they are witnessing the arrival of a global star. Subscribe if you are new here, because we tell stories like this every single week. And drop a comment below. Tell us what part of Matty's journey hit you the hardest. We read every single one. See you in the next one.